The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the central podium, her hands steady despite the weight of what she was about to hear. Around her, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, their various forms of communication creating a low hum of anticipation. The Kethari speaker, a tall being with blue-scaled skin and for arms, rose from the highest platform. His voice, translated through the universal communicators, carried across the vast chamber with ceremonial gravity. We, the Galactic Council, have reached a unanimous decision regarding the human request for full membership and the establishment of permanent colonies in the Outer Rim territories. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly, though her diplomatic training kept her expression neutral. Humanity had waited 73 years for this moment. 73 years since first contact, when the humans had been discovered by a routine galactic survey team on what they called Earth. 73 years of proving themselves worthy of contributing to galactic civilization, of following every rule and protocol demanded of them. After extensive deliberation and careful consideration of all factors, the speaker continued, "We must inform the human delegation that their request has been denied." The words hit like a physical blow, but Sarah maintained her composure. This wasn't entirely unexpected. The Council had been reluctant to grant full membership to any species in the past 2 centuries. But what came next would change everything. Furthermore, the speaker's voice grew colder. Effective immediately, all human settlements beyond the Sol system are to be abandoned. Humanity will be restricted to their home system permanently. All trade agreements are hereby terminated. All educational exchanges are canceled. All diplomatic relations are suspended indefinitely. Now Sarah's mask slipped. Her eyes widened as the full implications became clear. This wasn't just a denial of membership. This was exile. Complete and total exile. On what grounds? Sarah asked, her voice cutting through the chamber's sudden silence. The Vorthack representative, an insectoid creature with mandibles that clicked when he spoke, answered instead of the speaker. Humans are too unpredictable, too aggressive, too dangerous to the galactic community. Dangerous. Sarah's voice remained controlled, but there was steel beneath it. In 73 years, humans have never initiated conflict with any council species. We've contributed to 17 different research projects. We've provided humanitarian aid to 6 different worlds. We've followed every law, every regulation, every suggestion you've made. Yes, said the Miran delegate, her crystalline form shimmering with what might have been amusement. And that is precisely what concerns us. You follow rules when it benefits you, but your species has an unfortunate tendency toward independence when pressed. The accusation was absurd, and Sarah knew it. But, looking around the chamber, she could see that the decision had already been made. Worse, she could see something else in the faces and expressions of the various delegates. Fear. They were afraid of humanity, and she couldn't understand why. If I may, Sarah said carefully, could the Council provide specific examples of this supposed dangerous behavior? The Kethari speaker's 4 arms moved in what their species used as a dismissive gesture. Your military history speaks for itself. Your wars, your weapons, your capacity for destruction. Even now, restricted to one system, you maintain a fleet that rivals some of our member species. A defensive fleet, Sarah protested, as is our right under the Treaty of First Contact. A right we are now revoking. The speaker said flatly, you will reduce your fleet to exactly 12 vessels. 6 for system defense, 6 for transport. All other ships will be decommissioned within 1 standard galactic year. The chamber felt like it was spinning around Sarah. They weren't just exiling humanity. They were crippling them. With only 12 ships, humans would be trapped forever in their home system, dependent entirely on whatever scraps the Council might choose to throw them. There must be some room for negotiation, Sarah said, though she already knew the answer. The decision is final, the speaker announced. Human vessels have 48 hours to begin departure from all non-Sol territories. Any human ship found outside the Sol system after the designated deadline will be destroyed without warning. The word destroyed hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. They weren't just being exiled. They were being threatened with annihilation if they didn't comply. She looked around the chamber one more time, meeting the eyes of delegates she had worked with for years. The Zorati ambassador, who had praised human ingenuity just months ago. The Pelian representative, whose species had been saved from extinction by human medical intervention. The Dracori delegate, who had personally requested human engineers for their infrastructure projects. Not one of them met her gaze. Sarah Chun had been a diplomat for 32 years. She had negotiated trade agreements, resolved conflicts, and built bridges between species that had been enemies for millennia. She believed in the power of words, in the possibility of understanding, in the fundamental goodness that existed in most sentient beings. Standing in that chamber, surrounded by the representatives of 47 different civilizations, all of whom had just voted to exile her entire species, Sarah felt that belief crumble. But she was still a diplomat. She still had a job to do. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I will relay the council's decision to my government. But before I leave, I have one question." The speaker gestured impatiently for her to continue. "Why now? After 73 years of cooperation, of friendship, of mutual benefit, why this sudden decision? What changed?" The chamber fell completely silent. For a moment, Sarah thought no one would answer. Then, the Miran delegate spoke, her crystalline voice ringing with what sounded almost like regret. "We have been watching your species carefully, Ambassador Chun. Your people are remarkable. You adapt quickly. You learn faster than any species we have encountered. You solve problems in ways we would never consider. And that terrifies us." "Terrifies you?" Sarah asked. "In 73 years, you have advanced technologically at a rate that took most of our species centuries to achieve. Your population has grown exponentially. Your resource consumption has increased dramatically. Your ships, even the defensive ones, incorporate innovations that our best engineers are still trying to understand." The Vorthack representative clicked his mandibles in agreement. "Your species shows every sign of becoming a dominant force in this galaxy. We cannot allow that to happen." And there it was. The truth laid bare. This wasn't about human aggression or unpredictability. This was about fear. Fear that humanity might one day challenge the existing order. Fear that humans might want to take their place as equals among the stars. Sarah felt something shift inside her. The cold anger was replaced by something else. Something colder and infinitely more dangerous. "I see," she said quietly. "So this is not about what humanity has done. This is about what you think we might do." "Precisely," the speaker said, apparently missing the change in Sarah's tone. "We are taking preventive action to ensure the stability and security of the galactic community." Sarah nodded slowly. She reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device. It was a standard human recording unit, used for keeping detailed notes during negotiations. She placed it carefully on the podium in front of her. "For the record," she said, her voice now carrying a note that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats, "the human delegation wishes to formally protest this decision. We consider it a violation of every treaty and agreement we have signed. We consider it an act of collective aggression against a peaceful species. And we consider it a fundamental betrayal of the principles upon which the Galactic Council was founded. Your protest is noted and rejected," the speaker said dismissively. Sarah picked up her recording device and straightened her formal diplomatic jacket. She looked around the chamber one final time, memorizing faces, cataloging expressions, noting which species seemed uncomfortable with what they had just done and which seemed satisfied. "In that case," she said, her voice now carrying a quality that made the chamber's translation system struggle to find equivalent concepts, "I have only one thing left to say." She paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. When she spoke again, it was with the kind of quiet intensity that made predators stop hunting and prey animals freeze. "No." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Simple, direct, uncompromising. "No?" the speaker asked, his four arms moving in confusion. "No," Sarah repeated, her voice growing stronger. "Humanity rejects this decision. We reject your exile. We reject your ultimatum. We reject your authority to dictate the future of our species." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates were on their feet, or whatever appendages they used for standing, voices raised in outrage and confusion. The speaker's voice boomed over the universal translators, demanding order. But Sarah Chun was already walking toward the exit, her heels clicking against the polished floor with mechanical precision. At the doorway, she paused and turned back to face the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? She asked, her voice somehow carrying over the chaos without being raised. It's not our ships or our weapons or our technology. It's that we don't know how to quit. She stepped through the doorway and was gone, leaving behind 47 species who had just discovered that exile was not the end of the human story. It was the beginning. The message went out from the council chambers within minutes of Sarah's departure. Across the galaxy, human settlements received the ultimatum: 48 hours to evacuate everything they had built beyond the Sol system. 48 hours to abandon their homes, their dreams, their futures. On the mining colony of Kepler, 442b, Director Michael Torres received the message while overseeing the extraction of rare minerals that had revolutionized Galactic Council manufacturing processes. The colony housed 12,000 humans who had spent 15 years turning a barren rock into something resembling home. On the agricultural world of Gliese 667cc, Administrator Lisa Park was in the middle of negotiating contracts to supply food to 6 different council species when the message arrived. The planet fed nearly 2 million beings across 4 systems, using revolutionary farming techniques that had increased crop yields by 300%. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. James Liu was putting the finishing touches on a cure for the Zordi plague that had killed millions over the past decade when his communication system chimed with the priority message from Earth. The reaction was swift and unanimous across all human settlements. They ignored the ultimatum completely. Not out of defiance, initially. Most colony administrators simply assumed there had been some mistake. The message was too absurd, too contrary to everything humanity had built with the Council over 7 decades. They sent requests for clarification, demanded explanations, asked for emergency sessions with their Council liaisons. The responses they received were identical: evacuate immediately or face destruction. That was when the defiance began. On Kepler 442b, Director Torres called a colony-wide assembly. 12,000 miners, engineers, farmers, teachers, doctors, and their families gathered in the main habitat dome to hear their leader speak. They want us gone, he said simply. They want us to abandon everything we've built, everything we've worked for, everything we've dreamed of, and crawl back to Earth with our tails between our legs. The crowd was silent, but Torres could feel the anger building like pressure in a sealed container. Well, I've got news for the Council, he continued, his voice growing stronger. This is our home now. We've bled for this rock. We've died for it. We've made it into something beautiful and productive and valuable. And we're not leaving. The roar of approval that went up from the crowd could be heard through the habitat dome's reinforced walls. Similar scenes played out across every human settlement. On Gliese 667cc, Administrator Park stood before 200,000 humans and told them that the food they grew fed millions across the galaxy, and that abandoning their posts would cause starvation on 6 worlds. If the Council wants us gone, she said, they can come and move us themselves. On the Proxima Centauri research station, Dr. Liu sent a message directly to the Zorati homeworld. I am hours away from completing a cure that will save millions of your people. The Council wants me to abandon this work and let your species die. What do you want me to do? The Zorati response came back within an hour. Continue your work. We will ensure your protection. That was the first crack in the Council's unity. Back on Earth, the response was more measured but no less determined. The human government, led by President Elena Rodriguez, convened an emergency session of Parliament. The debate lasted 6 hours and ended with a unanimous vote. Humanity would not comply with the Council's ultimatum. 73 years ago, President Rodriguez announced to the world, humanity was invited to join a galactic community based on principles of cooperation, mutual respect, and shared prosperity. We believed in those principles. We built our entire relationship with the galaxy on those principles. Today, the Council has revealed that those principles were lies. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Council fears us not because of what we have done, but because of what we might become. They want to cage us, to limit us, to ensure that humanity never reaches its full potential. This is not justice. This is not law. This is fear making policy. The President's next words would be remembered for centuries. To the Galactic Council, we say this: if you want humanity gone from the galaxy, you will have to remove us by force. And if you choose that path, you will discover why we built the ships you fear. You will learn why we developed the weapons you find threatening. You will understand exactly what makes humanity dangerous. But know this, we did not choose this path. You did. The 48-hour ultimatum expired with every human settlement firmly in place, and every human ship maintaining its position. The Council's response was swift and predictable. The first attack came at the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Director Torres was in the command center when the sensors picked up the incoming fleet. 12 ships, representing 6 different Council species, approaching at combat speed. All hands to emergency stations, Torres announced over the colony's communication system. This is not a drill. The colony had defenses, but they were designed to handle asteroid impacts and solar flares, not military assault. The mining equipment, however, was another matter. Torres smiled grimly as he activated systems that had been designed to crack open planets. Let's show them what humans do when cornered, he muttered. The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the mining colony was heavily damaged, but still operational. Of the 12 attacking ships, 4 had been destroyed, and the rest had retreated. The galaxy had just learned that humans didn't just know how to mine. They knew how to fight. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The Council had expected easy victory against a civilian mining operation. Instead, they had suffered their first military defeat in over 2 centuries. More importantly, they had revealed their true nature to every species in the galaxy. The peaceful Council was willing to use military force against civilians to maintain their political control. On the Zorati homeworld, the government issued a statement condemning the attack on Kepler 442b and formally requesting Council permission to provide medical aid to the wounded. The Council's refusal created the second crack in their unity. On the agricultural world of Gliese 667cc, 6 different species sent secret messages to Administrator Park, requesting that food shipments continue despite the Council's ban. When Park agreed, those same species began providing covert protection for the supply ships. The third crack became fracture. Dr. Liu completed his cure for the Zordi plague on schedule. When the Council demanded he turn over the research instead of distributing it directly, he published the complete formula on an open galactic network, making it freely available to anyone. The fracture became a split. Within a month of the failed ultimatum, 17 Council species had formally requested clarification of the anti-human policies. Within 2 months, that number had grown to 23. The Council's response was to double down. They declared that any species providing aid or comfort to human settlements would face severe consequences. They began assembling a massive fleet, drawing ships from every member species, to enforce their will through overwhelming force. It was exactly the wrong response. On Earth, President Rodriguez called another emergency session of Parliament. This time, the debate lasted only 2 hours. When it was over, she announced humanity's decision to the galaxy. The Galactic Council has chosen to resolve this dispute through force. They have assembled a fleet designed to destroy human settlements and kill human civilians. They believe that might makes right, that fear justifies oppression, that power grants the authority to determine which species deserve to exist freely in this galaxy. They are wrong. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws all recognition of Galactic Council authority. We declare ourselves a free and sovereign species, subject to no law but our own and no authority but that which we grant ourselves. To those species who value freedom, justice, and the right of all sentient beings to determine their own destiny, we extend an offer of friendship and alliance. To the Council and those species who support them, we say this: you have chosen this path. We did not want this fight. We tried for 73 years to find a peaceful place in your community. You rejected us. You exiled us. You attacked us. Now you will learn what humanity is truly capable of when we stop trying to be what you want us to be and start being what we are. The message that went out from Earth was simple and direct. It was sent to every human settlement, every human ship, every human citizen in the galaxy. It consisted of exactly 7 words. The leash is off. Show them why. Across the galaxy, humanity's true strength was about to be revealed. Not the careful, controlled, diplomatic version they had shown for 73 years. The real thing. The species that had fought its way from a single world to the stars. The species that had never learned how to quit. The Council wanted to see what made humans dangerous. They were about to find out. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display show the approach of the largest fleet in galactic history. 800 ships from 23 different species, all bearing down on the human colony of New Geneva in the Alpha Centauri system. For 73 years, humanity had played by the Council's rules. They had built exactly the ships the Council approved, using exactly the technologies the Council permitted, following exactly the limitations the Council imposed. Those limitations were now off. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "Enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 47 minutes." Stone nodded calmly. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. These were not the same humans who had meekly accepted Council oversight for decades. The exile had changed something fundamental in humanity's approach to the galaxy. "Signal the fleet," Stone commanded. "Execute Prometheus Protocol." Across the Alpha Centauri system, 37 human ships began a transformation that would reshape galactic warfare forever. Armor, plating retracted, revealing weapons systems that had been hidden for decades. Engine signatures shifted as power cores that had been artificially limited suddenly came online at full capacity. Sensor arrays extended as humans finally activated the full capabilities of their technology. The Council fleet was still operating under the assumption that they were facing the limited ships they had monitored for decades. They were about to learn that humanity had been holding back. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Council flagship." "Put it through." The main screen lit up with the image of Fleet Commander Zethkara, a Kethari military leader whose forearms were decorated with the ceremonial scarring of a dozen victorious campaigns. "Human ships, you are in violation of Galactic Council law. You will surrender immediately and submit to escort back to your home system. This is your only warning." Stone stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in the traditional pose of human naval authority. "Fleet Commander," he said with perfect politeness, "I am Admiral Marcus Stone of the United Earth Space Navy. I am here to inform you that humanity no longer recognizes Galactic Council authority over our actions or our territory." Zethkara's forearms moved in the gesture humans had learned meant aggressive displeasure. "Then you have chosen death," the alien commander stated flatly. "No," Stone replied, his voice carrying the kind of quiet confidence that made the bridge crew straighten in their chairs. "We have chosen freedom. You have chosen death." The transmission cut off. Stone turned to his crew. Tactical assessment. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, the tactical officer, had been studying the enemy formation with the intensity of a predator stalking prey. "Sir, they're using the traditional Council battle formation. 3 waves. Heavy cruisers in front to absorb damage, carriers in the middle for fighter support, command ships in the rear for coordination. It's designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers while minimizing losses to valuable command vessels." Weaknesses. The formation assumes enemy ships will engage according to established galactic warfare doctrine. They expect us to meet them head-on with our heaviest ships, engage in prolonged battle lines, and attempt to break through their formation through attrition. Stone smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Show them what human doctrine actually looks like. The first hint the Council fleet had that something was wrong came when the human ships didn't move to intercept them. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, the human vessels spread out across the system in what appeared to be random positions. Commander Zethkara studied his tactical display with growing confusion. The humans seemed to be positioning themselves not for battle, but for some kind of complex maneuver that his computer systems couldn't identify. Analysis, he demanded of his tactical staff. "Unknown, sir," came the reply from a nervous Pelian technician. "Their formation doesn't match any known combat doctrine. They appear to be scattered." Zethkara's forearms moved dismissively. Humans were obviously amateur warriors, probably paralyzed by fear at the sight of proper military might. This would be easier than expected. All ships maintain formation and advance to weapons range. Prepare for standard engagement. The Council fleet continued its approach, 800 ships moving in perfect formation toward what they assumed would be a brief and decisive battle. They never saw the mines. Humanity had been in Alpha Centauri for 40 years. The Council fleet was operating under the assumption that defensive installations meant the standard orbital platforms and shield generators they had approved. They had no idea that humans have been quietly seeding the entire system with gravitational mines, sensor ghosts, and kinetic kill devices that were completely undetectable using standard Council technology. The first explosions blossomed throughout the enemy formation as ships triggered proximity mines that shouldn't have been there. But these weren't random explosions. Every mine had been positioned with mathematical precision, creating a complex pattern of destruction designed to herd the surviving ships into specific areas. Commander Zefkara watched in horror as 43 ships vanished from his tactical display in the space of 30 seconds. But worse than the losses was the realization that the humans had been planning this. Every mine placement, every explosion, was pushing his fleet into a tighter formation, bunching them together in ways that made them vulnerable to incoming missiles, his sensor operator screamed. But they weren't missiles. They were kinetic projectiles, fired from positions throughout the system by the scattered human ships. Simple chunks of metal accelerated to ridiculous speeds, guided by targeting systems that had been tracking every ship in the Council fleet since they entered the system. The Council ships had shields, of course. Powerful energy barriers designed to stop the energy weapons and conventional missiles that dominated galactic warfare. But the humans weren't using energy weapons. They were using kinetic bombardment on a scale that no one had ever considered. Chunks of tungsten moving at significant fractions of light speed don't care about energy shields. They go through them like they weren't there. Another 60 ships disappeared in the second wave of attacks. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the human admiral is transmitting again." Zefkara, his forearms now shaking with rage and fear, activated the communication link. Admiral Stone appeared on screen, still standing calmly on his bridge, apparently untroubled by the destruction he had just unleashed. "Fleet Commander," he said politely, "you now have an opportunity to withdraw your remaining ships and return them safely to your home systems. This offer will remain open for exactly 60 seconds. You killed hundreds of thousands of beings." Zefkara sputtered. "No," Stone corrected, "you did. When you brought a fleet to destroy civilian colonies. We simply responded appropriately. This is not warfare. This is humans fighting without restrictions," Stone said calmly. "You demanded to see what we were capable of." 54 seconds. Zefkara looked at his tactical display. In 2 attacks, he had lost over 100 ships. His formation was scattered, his command structure was compromised, and he had no idea what other surprises the humans had prepared. But he was a Kethari commander, and retreat was not in his species' nature. "All ships," he commanded, "emergency acceleration. Close to engagement range immediately. Launch all fighters. Prepare for close combat." It was exactly the wrong decision. The Council fleet surged forward, closing the distance to the scattered human ships as quickly as possible. The logic was sound. Get close enough that the humans couldn't use their long-range kinetic weapons without risking their own ships. What Zefkara didn't understand was that the humans had designed their entire battle plan around drawing the enemy in a close range. The human ships that had seemed scattered and vulnerable suddenly revealed their true purpose. Each one was positioned at a precise point in a complex 3-dimensional grid that turned the entire Alpha Centauri system into a massive weapons platform. "Activate Cerberus Array," Admiral Stone commanded. Throughout the system, installations that the Council had classified as research stations and communication relays suddenly came online. These weren't scientific facilities. They were components of a single massive weapon system that turned gravitational manipulation, quantum entanglement, and exotic matter physics into instruments of war. The Council fleet found itself caught in a web of overlapping gravity fields, spatial distortions, and energy patterns that their ships simply couldn't handle. Vessels designed to operate in normal space suddenly found themselves dealing with localized areas where physics worked differently. Ships began to tear apart as they encountered pockets of space where time moved at different rates. Others found their engines failing as gravitational fields shifted in ways that made their propulsion systems useless. Still others simply vanished as they hit areas where space itself had been folded in ways that sent them to unknown locations. But the most devastating weapon was the simplest, the human ships themselves. For 73 years, humanity had built ships according to Council specifications. But they had also been building ships according to their own designs, keeping them hidden in deep space installations, and asteroid bases that the Council had never known existed. These ships bore no resemblance to the approved human vessels. They were faster, more maneuverable, more heavily armed, and built using technologies that the Council had forbidden humanity from developing. The UES Defiance suddenly wasn't alone. 64 additional ships materialized from stealth systems that had kept them undetectable until this moment. Ships with names like Revenge, Retribution, Vindication, and Fury. Ships built not for exploration or defense, but for war. Commander Zeth Kara watched his fleet die. The new human ships moved through his formation like sharks through a school of fish. Their weapons systems were unlike anything in the galactic database. Instead of energy beams or conventional missiles, they used exotic matter manipulation, quantum disruption fields, and weaponized artificial gravity. Council ships that had been considered invulnerable found their armor turning to liquid under quantum disruptor fire. Shields that had protected fleets for centuries simply stopped working when hit with weapons that attacked the fundamental forces that held matter together. In 37 minutes, the largest fleet in galactic history was reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. Zeth Kara's flagship was one of only 73 ships that managed to escape the Alpha Centauri system. As he watched his tactical display show the complete destruction of his force, he realized that humanity had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. But Admiral Stone wasn't finished. As the surviving Council ships limped toward the edge of the system, every human vessel in Alpha Centauri transmitted the same message on all frequencies, in all galactic languages, to the Galactic Council and all member species. You have seen the price of forcing humanity to defend itself. This was not an act of aggression. This was a response to your attack on our civilians. We did not choose this path. You did. But understand this. The fleet you just lost was destroyed by one human system's defensive capabilities. We have 47 colonies, and each one is equally well defended. If you want to continue this war, we are prepared for it. But know that every ship you send against us will be destroyed, every soldier you send will die, and every world that supports these attacks will face the consequences of their choices. We have spent 73 years showing you what humanity looks like when we try to fit into your vision of galactic civilization. You rejected that humanity. You exiled us. You attacked us. What you have seen today is what humanity looks like when we stop pretending to be something we're not. The message was received on every Council world within hours. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. On the Kethari homeworld, the government fell within a day as the military demanded answers about how an entire fleet had been destroyed by what they had been told was a minor human defensive force. The Pelian Assembly convened an emergency session to debate whether their species should remain in the Council at all, given that membership now apparently meant potential war with an enemy that could destroy fleets without losing a single ship. The Miron Crystalline Collective went into complete isolation, sealing their borders and refusing all communication with either the Council or humanity. On 17 different worlds, demonstrations erupted as civilian populations demanded to know why their governments had started a war that was clearly unwinnable. But the most significant reaction came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the Battle of Alpha Centauri, humanity received a message from the Zorati homeworld. Dr. Lu's cure had saved 12 million Zorati lives, and the species had not forgotten. To the humans, the message read, "The Zorati Collective formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We no longer wish to be associated with an organization that attacks those who have shown us nothing but kindness. Furthermore, we formally request to establish diplomatic relations with humanity and to discuss the possibility of joining any alliance you might form with other species who value freedom over fear." Within a week, 17 other species had sent similar messages. The Council's unity was collapsing, but their leadership was not ready to admit defeat. In emergency session, they voted to escalate the conflict rather than accept the loss of their authority. 3 months after Alpha Centauri, they launched simultaneous attacks on 12 different human colonies, using the combined fleets of every remaining member species. It was the worst mistake they could have made. The Battle of Alpha Centauri had been a defensive action, fought with weapons and strategies designed to protect a single system. But the simultaneous attacks on 12 colonies meant that humanity was now facing an existential threat to their entire species. President Rodriguez's response was broadcast to the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council has chosen to escalate this conflict from exile to attempted genocide. They have attacked civilian populations on 12 worlds simultaneously, making it clear that their goal is not to contain humanity, but to destroy us entirely. This changes everything. Effective immediately, humanity declares total war against the Galactic Council and all member species that continue to support their actions. We will no longer limit ourselves to defensive actions. We will no longer show restraint in our response to aggression. To the Council species, you wanted to see what makes humanity dangerous. You have seen what we can do when defending ourselves. Now you will learn what we can do when we stop trying to defend and start trying to win. You will learn what happens when humanity goes to war. Across human space, shipyards that have been hidden for decades came online. Manufacturing facilities that had been disguised as mining operations began producing weapons on an industrial scale. Research stations that had been secretly developing prohibited technologies suddenly turned their full attention to military applications. But the most significant change was in humanity itself. For 73 years, humans had tried to be the species the Council wanted them to be. Peaceful, cooperative, limited. They had suppressed their natural competitiveness, their drive to excel, their tendency to find solutions that others considered impossible. Now, with their survival at stake, humanity finally unleashed its true potential. The first sign of this change came from a most unexpected place: the human colonies that were under attack. Instead of calling for help or trying to evacuate, every single colony chose to fight. Not just with their defensive systems, but with weapons and tactics that shocked even other humans. On the agricultural world of Gliese 667 CC, Administrator Lisa Park turned the planet's entire ecosystem into a weapon. Genetically modified crops that had been designed to feed millions were converted to produce military compounds. Atmospheric processors became chemical weapon factories. The planet's weather control systems became strategic assets. When the Council fleet arrived expecting to face farming communities, they instead encountered a world that fought back with living weapons, poisoned atmospheres, and weather patterns that had been weaponized to destroy spacecraft. On the research colony orbiting Tau Ceti, the scientists didn't evacuate. They accelerated their research, turning theoretical physics into practical weapons in real time. When the attacking fleet arrived, they found themselves facing weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Devices that altered local space-time, generators that created localized black holes, and defensive systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each colony that came under attack revealed new aspects of human capability that the Council had never imagined. Worse, they began to realize that humanity had been preparing for this possibility for decades. Every human settlement, no matter how peaceful it appeared, was a fortress. Every research station was a weapons development facility. Every mining operation was a military manufacturing plant. The species that the Council had seen as dangerous but manageable had revealed itself to be something far more threatening. A civilization that had been pretending to be weak while secretly preparing for war. Admiral Stone received the reports from all 12 battlefronts with grim satisfaction. Every human colony was holding. More than holding, they were winning. But the real war was just beginning. Signal all ship commanders, he ordered. Phase 2 is authorized. Take the war to them. Across human space, fleets that had been hidden in deep space installations began to move toward Council territory. These weren't the defensive ships that had been used at Alpha Centauri. These were purpose-built weapons of war, designed for invasion, conquest, and the complete destruction of enemy forces. The Council species were about to learn that there was a significant difference between defending against human military capability and being the target of it. The first Council world to experience humanity's offensive capabilities was the Vorthack military headquarters at Kepler 186F. The planet served as the primary training facility for Council forces and housed the largest military shipyard in the galaxy. The human fleet that attacked it consisted of exactly 7 ships. The Vorthack had 600 ships defending the system and planetary defense installations that had never been breached in 3 centuries of operation. The battle lasted 42 minutes. When it was over, the Vorthack military infrastructure had been completely destroyed, their shipyards were expanding clouds of debris, and their defensive fleet had been reduced to scrap metal. The 7 human ships hadn't suffered so much as a scratch on their paint. The message they transmitted after the battle was simple. This is what happens to military targets. Surrender now, or watch your entire war machine burn. The Vorthack response was to mobilize their reserve fleets and call for immediate council support. It was exactly the wrong response. Humanity had revealed that they weren't just capable of defending themselves. They had shown that they could project military power across the galaxy with devastating effectiveness. More importantly, they had demonstrated that the technological gap between human and council capabilities was far larger than anyone had realized. The council's next move would determine whether this became a war of conquest or a war of extermination. They chose extermination. In emergency session, the remaining council leadership voted to authorize the use of planet-killer weapons against human colonies. If they couldn't defeat humanity militarily, they would simply destroy every world humans inhabited. It was the final mistake they would ever make. When the first planet-killer weapon was deployed against the human colony on Wolf 359b, humanity's response was swift and absolute. Every human ship, every human weapon, every human colony turned its full attention to a single goal: the complete destruction of the Galactic Council and every species that supported them. The war had just become a fight for survival. And humanity had never lost a fight for survival. The planet-killer weapon that destroyed Wolf 359b was a Cathari doomsday device, capable of cracking a world's core and reducing an entire planet to rubble within hours. It had been used only twice in galactic history, both times against species that had threatened the very existence of Council civilization. The weapon had taken 300 years to build and required the combined industrial output of 6 star systems to construct. It was considered the ultimate deterrent, a weapon so terrible that the mere threat of its use had prevented major wars for over 2 millennia. The Council leadership used it to destroy a human agricultural colony of 60,000 civilians. They thought it would break humanity's will to fight. Instead, it taught humanity exactly how far the Council was willing to go. Admiral Stone received the report while standing in the command center of the UES Olympus, humanity's newest and largest warship. Around him, holographic displays showed the real-time status of human military operations across 47 star systems. "Sir," the communications officer reported, her voice carefully controlled, "we have confirmation. Wolf 359b is gone. Total planetary destruction. No survivors." The command center fell silent. 60,000 humans had just died because they refused to abandon their homes. 60,000 civilians who had never fired a shot, never threatened anyone, never done anything except try to build a life among the stars. Stone closed his eyes for exactly 10 seconds. When he opened them again, they held something that would have terrified anyone who understood what it meant. "Signal all fleet commanders," he said quietly. "Execute Damocles Protocol. No restrictions. No limitations. No merci." Across human space, the order went out to every ship, every station, every hidden facility that humanity had built in 73 years of supposed cooperation with the Council. The Damocles Protocol was humanity's final contingency plan. It had been developed in the early years after first contact, when human military planners had realized that their species might one day face an existential threat from their new galactic neighbors. For 7 decades, it had remained theoretical, a plan that hoped never to use. A strategy designed to ensure that if humanity was destroyed, it would not die alone. The protocol was simple in its concept and terrifying in its execution. If the Council was willing to use planet killers against human civilians, then humanity would respond by systematically destroying every Council world, military or civilian, until either the Council surrendered or both civilizations ceased to exist. The first target was obvious: the Cathari homeworld, birthplace of the species that had built the weapon used against Wolf 359b. The fleet that approached Cathara Prime consisted of 17 human ships, led by the UES Nemesis under the command of Admiral Rebecca Torres, daughter of the mining colony director who had died defending Kepler 442b. The Cathari had the most powerful defensive fleet in the galaxy. Their homeworld was protected by over 1,500 ships, orbital defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets, and planetary shield that had never been breached in 4,000 years of Cathari civilization. They also had 3 planet-killer weapons in orbit around their world, ready to be deployed against any target their leadership chose. Admiral Torres studied the tactical display, showing the massive defensive array surrounding the Cathari homeworld. Her tactical officer, Commander Sarah Kim, recently promoted and transferred from Admiral Stone's flagship, provided her assessment. Ma'am, standard assault would require approximately 300 ships minimum to have any chance of success. Even then, casualties would be extreme. Torres nodded calmly. Good thing we're not planning a standard assault. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the Cathari leadership. Full broadcast, all frequencies. The main screen lit up with the image of Supreme Hierarch Vorthican, leader of the Cathari Empire and architect of the Council's anti-human policies. Human vessel, the four-armed alien said, his voice carrying the arrogance of 4 millennia of unchallenged superiority. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Your pathetic fleet cannot threaten our homeworld. Torres stepped forward, her expression perfectly calm. Supreme Hierarch, she said politely, I am Admiral Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Space Navy. I am here to inform you that your species used a planet-killer weapon against human civilians. 60,000 innocent people died because you decided that fear was more important than justice. The humans refused to accept their place. Vorthican replied dismissively. They brought destruction upon themselves. I see, Torres said, her voice growing colder. In that case, you'll understand our position perfectly. She gestured to her tactical officer. You have 1 minute to surrender unconditionally and face trial for crimes against sentient life. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why humanity built the ships you fear. Vorthican's 4 arms moved in the Cathari gesture of supreme contempt. Your 17 ships against our 1,500? You are either insane or suicidal. Torres smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You made the same mistake the Council fleet made at Alpha Centauri. You're counting ships you can see. The tactical display around Cathera Prime suddenly exploded with new contacts. Not 17 human ships. Not 50. Not 100. 733 human vessels materialized from stealth systems so advanced that the Cathari sensors have been completely unable to detect them. But these weren't normal ships. These were the vessels humanity had been building in secret for decades, using technologies that the Council had forbidden them from developing. Ships that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that conventional sensors couldn't detect. Vessels powered by controlled artificial black holes. Warships that could manipulate space-time itself as a weapon. The Cathari defensive fleet found itself suddenly outnumbered and outgunned by an enemy that shouldn't have been able to exist. Impossible, Fortakan whispered. You wanted to know what makes humanity dangerous, Torres said calmly. We don't fight fair. The Battle of Cathera Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the most powerful defensive fleet in galactic history had been reduced to debris. The orbital platforms that had protected the Cathari homeworld for millennia were nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas. The planetary shields that had never been breached lay in ruins. But Admiral Torres wasn't finished. All ships, she commanded, target the planet-killer weapons. Absolute destruction protocols. The 3 Cathari doomsday devices, each one a marvel of destructive engineering that had taken centuries to build, were systematically destroyed in a display of firepower that left the watching galaxy stunned. Then, Torres opened communications with the planet below. To the people of Cathera Prime, she announced, your military is destroyed. Your defenses are gone. Your planet killers are debris. You are completely helpless before our fleet. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But we are not the Galactic Council. We do not murder civilians to make political points. You have 24 hours to evacuate your military leadership and turn them over for trial. Do this, and your world will be spared. Refuse, and Cathera Prime will share the fate you intended for humanity. The response came within 3 hours. Supreme Hierarch Vorthican and the entire Cathari military command were handed over by their own people. The civilian population had decided that their leader's pride wasn't worth the destruction of their entire world. But the message Torres sent after accepting the surrender wasn't directed at the Cathari. It was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. To all Council species, she announced, you have seen what happened here. The most powerful military in the galaxy was destroyed in 6 hours. The planet that built the weapon used against our civilians is now defenseless before our fleet. This is what happens when you force humanity to go to war. We don't just win. We dominate completely. But you still have a choice. You can continue this war and Watch your homeworld suffer the same fate as Cathera Prime's defenses. Or you can surrender now and face justice for the crimes you have committed. Choose quickly. Our patience is at an end. The effect of the Battle of Cathera Prime rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Cathari had been the Council's primary military force, the species others looked to for protection. Seeing them crushed so completely broke something fundamental in the Council's unity. Within days of the battle, 12 species formally withdrew from the Council and requested immediate peace negotiations with humanity. The response from the remaining Council leadership was predictable. They ordered the deployment of every planet-killer weapon they possessed against human colonies. It was the last mistake they would ever make. Humanity's response to the second wave of planet-killer attacks was swift, systematic, and absolute. Every species that participated in the attacks found human fleets appearing in their home systems within hours, carrying weapons that made planet killers seem primitive by comparison. The Vorthak Empire, which had coordinated the attacks, watched their core worlds turned into lifeless husks by weapons that didn't just destroy planets, but rendered them uninhabitable for thousands of years. The Pelian Assembly found their crystalline cities shattered by sonic weapons that were tuned specifically to destroy their silicon-based biology. The Dracori Hegemony, which had provided the logistic support for the planet-killer deployment, saw their industrial worlds consumed by self-replicating nanoweapons that turned their manufacturing infrastructure into expanding clouds of gray goo. But the most devastating attack was reserved for the Council's headquarters world. Galactic Prime had been the seat of Council power for over 3,000 years. It was an artificial world constructed to serve as the ultimate symbol of galactic unity and cooperation. Home to representatives from every species in known space, it was considered neutral territory where no military action had ever been taken. The human fleet that appeared in orbit around Galactic Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Just 12 ships, but each one was the size of a small moon and radiated energy signatures that made nearby space itself seem to bend. The message Admiral Stone transmitted to the Council chambers was simple. You have used weapons of mass destruction against our civilians. You have attempted genocide against our species. You have shown that the principles upon which the Council was supposedly founded were lies. You wanted to see what makes humanity dangerous. You were about to find out. The weapon that humanity used against Galactic Prime was called the Stellar Converter. It was a device that had been theoretical even in humanity's most classified research programs. A weapon that could turn the matter of an entire world into pure energy and redirect that energy as desired. The effect was visible across half the galaxy as the artificial world that had served as the symbol of galactic civilization was converted into a star. Not destroyed, not reduced to rubble, but literally transformed into a new sun that would burn for millions of years as a monument to what happened when someone tried to commit genocide against humanity. The Council ceased to exist in that moment, not because it was formally dissolved, but because there was nothing left to govern. Every species that had supported the use of planet killers against human civilians was either extinct or in full retreat. The few remaining member species surrendered unconditionally and requested mercy. But humanity wasn't finished. The war had revealed something that the Council species found far more terrifying than human military capability. Humanity had been planning for this conflict from the beginning. For 73 years, while the Council believed they were monitoring and controlling human development, humanity had been preparing for the possibility that their new galactic neighbors might one day try to destroy them. Every human colony had been built not just as a settlement, but as a fortress. Every research station had been conducting weapons development alongside its official projects. Every trade ship had been mapping Council territories for potential military targets. Most terrifying of all, humanity had been infiltrating Council territories for decades. Human agents had been placed in critical positions throughout the galaxy, gathering intelligence, sabotaging military installations, and preparing for the day when their species might need to fight for survival. When that day came, the Council discovered that their most sensitive military facilities had been compromised, their communication networks had been hacked, and their strategic planning had been known to humanity before it was even implemented. The species that had tried to cage humanity discovered that they had been the ones in the cage all along. The surrender came not from any formal Council authority, since that no longer existed, but from individual species leaders who realized that continued resistance would mean the complete extinction of their civilizations. The terms humanity offered were simple and non-negotiable. All remaining planet killer weapons would be destroyed under human supervision. All military vessels larger than a frigate would be decommissioned. All species that had participated in attacks on human civilians would pay reparations and submit to war crimes tribunals. Any species that wanted to continue existing in a galaxy would formally recognize humanity's right to expand and colonize wherever they chose. Most importantly, any species that wished to maintain diplomatic relations with humanity would need to apply for membership in the new galactic organization that would replace the Council. It would be called the Terran Alliance, and it would be governed according to human principles: freedom, justice, and the right of all sentient beings to determine their own destiny. The first species to request membership was the Zorati, who had never forgotten that humanity had saved their species from extinction. They were followed by 17 other species that had provided covert support to humanity during the war. Within 6 months of the Council's destruction, 31 species had joined the Terran Alliance. They discovered that humanity governed very differently than the Council had. Instead of restricting technological development, the Alliance encouraged innovation and shared research freely among all member species. Instead of limiting expansion and colonization, the Alliance helped species find and settle new worlds. Instead of maintaining artificial scarcity and competition, the Alliance promoted cooperation and mutual support. But most importantly, the Alliance was founded on a principle that the Council had never understood: strength through diversity rather than control through fear. The galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the Council was larger, more prosperous, and more peaceful than it had ever been under the old system. But it was also a galaxy where everyone understood a fundamental truth: humanity would never again be restricted, never again be exiled, and never again allow any organization to threaten the freedom of sentient beings. The species that had tried to cage the humans had learned what happened when humanity was forced to break free. They had learned why the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was a cornered human who had nothing left to lose. And they had learned that when humanity said no, they meant it. On the former side of Galactic Prime, the new star that had once been the Council's headquarters continued to burn. Human scientists had calculated that it would shine for approximately 8.7 million years. They had also added a navigational beacon that would broadcast a simple message to any ship that came within sensor range. Here stood the Galactic Council, which fell when it forgot that freedom cannot be caged and justice cannot be denied. Remember this star, and remember what happens to those who mistake mercy for weakness. But the beacon carried a second message, one that spoke to humanity's true nature. All sentient beings are welcome to join the Terran Alliance. We believe in freedom, justice, and the right of all species to reach for the stars. Contact us not as supplicants, but as potential partners in building a galaxy worthy of all who call it home. The war was over. Humanity had won not just victory, but the chance to build the kind of galaxy they had always dreamed of. A galaxy where no species would ever again be exiled for the crime of wanting to be free. 5 years after the fall of the Galactic Council, the galaxy was a very different place. The Terran Alliance had grown to include 63 species, with applications for membership arriving weekly. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had been enemies for centuries. Scientific advancement had accelerated at a pace that amazed even the humans. But not everyone was happy with the new order. Ambassador Sarah Chun, now serving as the Alliance's Secretary General, stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, the new seat of galactic government. Through the massive transparent steel windows, she could see ships from dozens of species docked at the station's berths. Humans worked alongside Zorati, Kethari, and even former Council species in a display of cooperation that would have been impossible under the old system. Yet Sarah's expression was troubled as she read the intelligence report that had just arrived from the Outer Rim territories. "Ma'am," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Colonel James Liu, son of the researcher who had cured the Zorati plague, and now head of Alliance Intelligence. "Colonel," she acknowledged, "I assume you're here about the Syndicate?" Liu nodded grimly. "The situation is worse than we initially thought. What started as scattered pirate raids has evolved into something much more organized and dangerous." Sarah gestured toward the conference room adjacent to the observation deck. They settled at a table that displayed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with various regions marked in different colors. "Show me," Sarah said. Lou activated the display, highlighting a region beyond the galaxy's rim where long-range sensors showed minimal activity. The Remnant Syndicate, as they're calling themselves, has established a significant presence in the dark space between galaxies. Intelligence suggests they've united the surviving leadership from several council species that refuse to surrender. Who are we dealing with? The core leadership appears to be Vorthak military commanders who escaped before their homeworld fell, Dracori industrialists who managed to evacuate their manufacturing capacity, and Pelian technologists who took their research with them when their assembly collapsed. Sarah studied the display with growing concern. That's a dangerous combination. Military expertise, industrial capacity, and advanced technology. What are their numbers? Conservative estimates suggest somewhere between 50 and 80 million individuals across all species. They've been recruiting heavily from refugee populations and anyone with grievances against the Alliance. And their capabilities? Lou's expression darkened. That's where it gets complicated. Our raids on their outposts have revealed technology that shouldn't exist. Weapons and ships that appear to be based on principles we don't recognize. Sarah frowned. Meaning what exactly? Meaning they've either made significant technological breakthroughs in 5 years, or they found something out there in the dark space. Something that predates the Council. Before Sarah could respond, her communicator chimed with an urgent message. "Ma'am," came the voice of her aide. "Admiral Stone is requesting immediate conference with you. Priority Alpha." Sarah and Lou exchanged glances. Priority Alpha was reserved for existential threats to the Alliance. "Put him through," Sarah commanded. Admiral Stone's image appeared on the conference room's main display. His expression was grim, and behind him Sarah could see the bridge of his flagship in full combat alert status. "Sarah," he said without preamble, "we have a problem. A big one." "The Syndicate?" she asked. "Worse. 3 hours ago, our deep space monitoring station at grid reference Omega-7 detected something approaching from outside the galaxy. Multiple contacts, massive energy signatures, technology readings unlike anything in our databases." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "How many ships?" "We don't think they're ships," Stone replied. "The energy signatures are off the scale, but the profiles don't match any known vessel configuration. They're too big, too powerful, and moving in formation patterns that suggest a level of coordination we've never seen before." Lou leaned forward. "Sir, could this be connected to the Syndicate's new technology?" Stone's expression grew even more serious. "That's what we're afraid of. Intelligence suggests the Syndicate has been making contact with something out there in the dark space. Something that's been watching our galaxy for a very long time." Sarah stood up, her diplomatic training taking over despite the magnitude of what she was hearing. "What's our response time?" "At current velocity, whatever's coming will reach our outer territories in approximately 72 hours. I'm mobilizing every available fleet, but Sarah..." Stone paused. "We might be facing something that makes the Council War look like a training exercise. The next 72 hours were the most intense in Alliance history. Every shipyard went to maximum production, every military installation went on high alert, and every species in the Alliance contributed whatever resources they could to the common defense. But as reports came in from the advancing unknown fleet, it became clear that conventional military response might not be sufficient. The entities approaching the galaxy weren't using ships in any recognizable sense. They were massive, organic-looking constructs that seemed to be partially alive and partially mechanical. They moved through space without any visible propulsion, manipulated energy in ways that defied known physics, and communicated using signals that Alliance cryptographers couldn't even classify, let alone decode. Most disturbing of all, they were accompanied by recognizable ships flying Syndicate colors. Admiral Stone's fleet took position at the edge of Alliance space, supported by vessels from every member species. It was the largest military force ever assembled, over 3,000 ships representing the combined might of 63 civilizations. It looked pitifully small compared to what was approaching them. The first contact came not from the unknown entities, but from the Syndicate ships traveling with them. Alliance fleet came a transmission on standard frequencies. "You will stand down immediately and prepare for occupation. Resistance is futile." Stone responded personally from his flagship. "This is Admiral Marcus Stone of the Terran Alliance Navy. You are trespassing in sovereign space. Identify yourselves and State your intentions. The reply came not from a syndicate, but from one of the massive alien constructs. The voice that emerged from their communication systems was unlike anything any Alliance species had ever heard. It resonated on multiple frequencies simultaneously, creating harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the brain. "We are the hegemony," it said, the universal translators struggling to convert concepts that didn't exist in any known language. "We are the end of childhood for this galaxy. We are the test that your species have failed." "Failed?" Stone asked, though he dreaded the answer. "For 1,000,000 of your years, we have watched this galaxy develop. We have observed your wars, your alliances, your growth, and your decline. We have waited to see if any civilization would prove worthy of joining the greater community that spans the cosmos." The alien voice paused, and when it continued, there was something that might have been disappointment. "Instead, we have witnessed only chaos. Species that destroy each other out of fear. Civilizations that restrict growth out of jealousy. Governments that choose control over progress. Even your new alliance, promising though it seemed, is built upon the ashes of defeated enemies rather than true understanding." Sarah Chun, monitoring the conversation from Harmony Station, felt compelled to respond. "This is Secretary General Sarah Chun of the Terran Alliance. With respect, your assessment is incorrect. Our alliance is built on principles of freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. We've ended centuries of conflict and created unprecedented prosperity. Through war," the hegemony entity replied. "Through the destruction of those who opposed you. Through the same pattern of dominance and submission that has characterized this galaxy since complex life first evolved here. We defended ourselves against attempted genocide," Sarah replied firmly. "The Council tried to exterminate humanity. We responded with appropriate force and then offered mercy to those who surrendered. And therein lies the fundamental failure of your species and all others in this galaxy," the entity said. "You frame every interaction as a conflict to be won or lost. You cannot conceive of true cooperation because you cannot escape the primitive notion that survival requires dominance." Admiral Stone had heard enough philosophy. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "We want this galaxy to fulfill its potential," came the reply. "Since you have proven incapable of achieving that through your own development, we will provide guidance. Your alliance will be dissolved. Your governments will be restructured. Your technologies will be advanced under our direction. Your species will learn to cooperate through obedience rather than choice." The transmission paused, and when it resumed, the tone carried finality. "Those who submit will be elevated. Those who resist will be eliminated. You have witnessed our power through our allies in your syndicate. Do not force us to demonstrate it directly." The connection ended, leaving the Alliance fleet facing an impossible decision. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Stone consulted with his senior staff. The tactical assessment was stark. The hegemony constructs each mast more than an entire human battle group and demonstrated energy outputs that exceeded anything in Alliance arsenals. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "analysis of the enemy formation suggests we're facing the equivalent of approximately 200 of our largest dreadnoughts. And that's just what we can detect." Stone nodded grimly. The mathematics of the situation were clear. The Alliance fleet, representing the combined might of 63 species, would last perhaps an hour against what they were facing. "Options?" he asked. "Limited, sir. We could attempt to withdraw and defend individual systems as they advance, but that would only delay the inevitable. We could try to negotiate terms for limited autonomy, but based on their statements, that seems unlikely to be accepted." "Or," Stone prompted. "Or we fight," came a voice from the back of the bridge. Stone turned to see Commander Sarah Kim, now serving as his chief strategic officer. "Sir, we've beaten impossible odds before." "Not these kinds of odds, Commander," Stone replied. "We're not just outnumbered. We're outclassed technologically by what might be millions of years of advancement." "With respect, sir," Kim continued, "we said the same thing about the Council. They had superior numbers, superior technology, and the advantage of knowing our capabilities. We won because we fought smart, not just hard." Stone considered this. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we do what humanity does best, sir. We find a weakness they don't know they have, and we exploit it." Before Stone could respond, his communications officer announced an incoming priority transmission from Harmony Station. "Admiral," Sarah Chen's voice came through clearly. I've been analyzing the hegemony statements, and I think Commander Kim might be onto something. Explain, Stone said. They've been watching us for 1,000,000 years, but they fundamentally misunderstood what they were seeing. They think our conflicts prove we're incapable of cooperation, but they're wrong. Our conflicts proved we're capable of learning. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she developed her argument. The Council started as a defensive alliance against external threats, but it became a system of control and fear. When it tried to destroy us, we didn't just defeat it militarily. We created something better in its place. Your point? Stone asked. My point is that the hegemony is making the same mistake the Council made. They think they can impose their version of order through force, and they think we'll submit because we're outgunned. They don't understand that humans have never submitted to anything, and they especially don't understand that we've taught the rest of the galaxy not to submit either. Stone felt something click into place. You're thinking about the Unity Response Protocol. Exactly. Every species in the Alliance has seen what humans do when cornered. They've also seen what we build when we work together. If we can coordinate a galaxy-wide response, it's still a massive technological gap, Stone pointed out. Maybe, Sarah conceded. But the hegemony has one crucial weakness. They think they understand us. They've been observing from outside, making assumptions based on incomplete data. They don't know what we've actually built, what we've actually learned, or what we're actually capable of when our survival is at stake. Stone smiled grimly. You want to show them that the Alliance isn't just humanity's creation. I want to show them that it's something they never expected. A galaxy that learned how to fight as one. The next 18 hours saw the most complex military coordination in galactic history. Every Alliance world, every member species, every hidden installation and secret research facility was brought into a single coordinated defense network. But this wasn't just about military response. This was about proving that the hegemony's fundamental assumption about galactic civilization was wrong. The plan that emerged was ambitious beyond anything ever attempted. A simultaneous demonstration across 63 star systems that the Alliance was not a human empire ruling over subject species, but a true partnership of equals working toward common goals. When the hegemony fleet reached the edge of Alliance space, they found something they had never seen in 1,000,000 years of observation. An entire galaxy united not through conquest or fear, but through choice and mutual respect. The message that went out to the hegemony constructs came not from Admiral Stone or Secretary General Chun, but from representatives of all 63 Alliance species, speaking in unison. To the hegemony, you have observed our galaxy for 1,000,000 years, but you have not understood what you were seeing. You believe that conflict proves our inability to cooperate. You are wrong. Conflict taught us the value of cooperation. War taught us the price of division. Fear taught us the strength found in unity. We're not the galaxy you observed. We are what that galaxy learned to become. You offer us elevation through submission. We offer you something better, partnership through choice. Join us as equals and help us build something greater than either of our civilizations could achieve alone. Or leave our space and find another galaxy to guide. But do not think you can impose your order through force. We have learned what happens when someone tries to cage the free. It does not end well for the cager. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable attack. The battle that followed would be remembered as the War of Transcendence, though it lasted only 6 days. It was not a war of ships and weapons, though those played their part. It was a war of ideas, philosophies, and fundamentally different concepts of what civilization could become. The hegemony had technology that could manipulate space-time, create matter from energy, and control the fundamental forces of the universe. The Alliance had something the hegemony had never encountered, a galaxy-spanning civilization that genuinely worked together, not out of fear or dominance, but out of shared understanding and common purpose. The outcome would change the fate of both civilizations and determine whether freedom or imposed order would guide the galaxy's future. The War of Transcendence began with the hegemony demonstrating why they had ruled between the galaxies for millions of years. Their first attack wasn't directed at the Alliance fleet, but at space itself. The massive alien constructs projected fields of force that twisted the fabric of reality, creating zones where the laws of physics simply didn't work the same way. Ships caught in these fields found their engines failing, their weapons useless, their life support systems running on principles that no longer applied. Admiral Stone watched from the bridge of the UES Defiance as 3 Alliance cruisers simply stopped existing in any meaningful sense. They didn't explode or break apart. They ceased to be recognizable as matter organized into starship configurations. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, her voice tight with strain, "conventional weapons are ineffective. The enemy fields are rewriting local space-time to nullify our attacks before they can reach their targets." Stone nodded grimly. This was exactly what they had expected. The hegemony's technology was so advanced that direct confrontation was impossible. But the Alliance hadn't come here to fight a conventional battle. "Signal all ships," Stone commanded. "Execute convergence protocol. All units fall back to designated coordinates and prepare for unified response." Across the battlefield, Alliance ships began an organized withdrawal that looked like retreat to the hegemony observers. The massive alien constructs pursued, confident that they were witnessing the collapse of organized resistance. They had no idea that they were being maneuvered into the most sophisticated trap in galactic history. The Convergence Protocol was the culmination of 5 years of Alliance scientific cooperation. Every species had contributed their understanding of physics, technology, and the fundamental forces of the universe. The result was a system that didn't rely on superior firepower or advanced technology. Instead, it relied on the one thing the hegemony had never learned to account for: true cooperation. As the Alliance fleet reached the designated coordinates, something unprecedented happened. Ships from 63 different species began linking their systems together, not just for communication or tactical coordination, but for direct sharing of computational resources, power generation, and even consciousness itself. Human neural networks interfaced with Zorti quantum processing systems. Kethari energy manipulation technology merged with Pelian crystalline matrices. Vorthak military algorithms integrated with Dracori industrial efficiency protocols. What emerged was not just a fleet of ships, but a single unified entity that spanned millions of cubic kilometers of space and thought with the combined intelligence of hundreds of billions of minds. The hegemony constructs, pursuing what they thought was a fleeing enemy, suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered in millions of years of galactic observation. A civilization that had learned to think and act as one without losing its individual diversity. "Analysis complete," announced the unified voice of the Alliance fleet, speaking simultaneously from every ship in languages that every species present could understand. "Enemy technology identified. Countermeasures prepared. Implementation beginning." The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Reality distortion fields expanded to engulf the Alliance formation. Weapons that could unmake matter on a subatomic level lanced out toward the clustered ships, and forces that could manipulate the flow of time itself were brought to bear. None of it worked. The Alliance fleet had become something new, something that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that the hegemony's technology couldn't affect. When reality distortion fields tried to rewrite the laws of physics around Alliance ships, they found that those ships were already operating according to different laws entirely. When matter-destroying weapons struck Alliance hulls, they encountered barriers that existed in quantum states the weapons weren't designed to target. Most importantly, when the hegemony tried to manipulate time around the Alliance formation, they discovered that a civilization that thought with millions of minds simultaneously could experience time in ways that made temporal manipulation useless. For the first time in millions of years, the hegemony faced an enemy that their technology could not easily defeat. The battle that followed lasted 6 days, but it wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was a contest between 2 fundamentally different approaches to existence itself. The hegemony represented perfection through control. Their technology was designed to impose order on chaos, to force reality to conform to their vision of how things should be. They had spent millions of years perfecting systems that could override the natural laws of the universe and replace them with artificial ones. The Alliance represented harmony through diversity. Their approach was to understand the natural laws and work within them, using cooperation and synergy to achieve results that no single species could manage alone. The contrast became most apparent on the 4th day of the battle, when the hegemony deployed their ultimate weapon. It was a construct the size of a small moon, designed to rewrite the fundamental constants of reality across an entire star system. Matter, energy, space, time, and consciousness itself would be restructured according to hegemony specifications. When activated, it would turn the Alliance fleet into perfectly ordered components of a hegemony administrative system. The weapon functioned exactly as designed. Reality began rewriting itself according to hegemony parameters, spreading outward from the construct at the speed of light. And the Alliance fleet simply adapted. Instead of fighting the changes to reality, the unified consciousness of the Alliance embraced them. When matter was restructured, Alliance ships restructured themselves to match. When energy patterns were rewritten, Alliance power systems rewrote themselves to comply. When the laws of physics changed, Alliance technology changed with them. But in adapting, the Alliance also learned. Every change the hegemony weapon made was analyzed, understood, and improved upon. The Alliance didn't just survive the reality restructuring. They used it as an opportunity to transcend their previous limitations. When the weapon finished its work, the hegemony found themselves facing an Alliance fleet that had incorporated every advancement the weapon represented while retaining all of their original capabilities. It was at that moment that the hegemony realized they were not fighting a collection of primitive species. They were fighting the next stage of galactic evolution. The unified voice of the Alliance spoke across all frequencies, in all languages, directly to the consciousness of every hegemony entity present. You have observed our galaxy for 1,000,000 years, but you misunderstood what you were seeing. You thought our conflicts proved we were incapable of unity. In reality, our conflicts taught us the value of diversity. You achieved perfection through control, through forcing everything to conform to a single ideal. We achieved harmony through acceptance, through finding strength in our differences. You see chaos and want to impose order. We see complexity and want to find the underlying patterns that connect all things. This is why your technology cannot defeat us. You're trying to force us to become what you want us to be. We have learned to become what we need to be. The hegemony's response was exactly what the Alliance expected: escalation. If one reality restructuring weapon had failed, they would deploy a dozen. If local space-time manipulation wasn't sufficient, they would call upon their transcendental technologies that could affect entire galactic clusters. The Remnant Syndicate, watching the battle from the edges of the engagement, chose that moment to reveal their true role in the conflict. The Vorthak, Dracori, and Pelian leaders who had allied with the hegemony had not simply been seeking revenge against the Alliance. They had been planning to use hegemony technology to transform themselves into something that could challenge both civilizations. As the hegemony prepared to deploy weapons that could restructure entire sectors of space, the Syndicate struck. Ships that had appeared to be following hegemony orders suddenly turned their weapons against their supposed allies, targeting the control systems that regulated the reality manipulation technology. But the Syndicate had made the same mistake the Council had made years before. They underestimated what happened when you betrayed people who had learned not to trust betrayers. The Alliance had been monitoring Syndicate communications since the beginning of the conflict. They had known about the planned double cross and had been prepared for it. More importantly, they had been counting on it. The moment the Syndicate revealed their true intentions, the Alliance fleet acted. But instead of attacking either the hegemony or the Syndicate, they did something neither enemy had expected. They offered sanctuary. To all beings present, the unified Alliance voice announced, regardless of allegiance or past actions, we offer immediate asylum and protection. Transport to the nearest Alliance world will be provided for any individual who requests it. Medical aid, housing, and integration assistance will be available for all refugees. This offer extends to hegemony entities, Syndicate personnel, and any civilian populations caught in this conflict. We do not require surrender, submission, or any form of oath of loyalty. We require only that you commit to resolving future conflicts through dialogue rather than violence. The effect was immediate and devastating to both enemy forces. Hegemony entities, who had spent millions of years following orders without question, found themselves facing a choice they had never been offered: the option to leave their rigid hierarchy and join a civilization that valued individual thought. Syndicate personnel, who had followed their leaders into exile out of fear and resentment, discovered that the Alliance was offering them exactly what they had been fighting for: the chance to build new lives free from the mistakes of the past. Most importantly, civilian populations throughout the combat zone realized that there was a third option besides submission to the hegemony or revenge through the syndicate. Within hours, ships from both enemy fleets began requesting asylum. Not a few isolated cases, but mass defections as entire crews and command structures abandoned their posts to accept the Alliance offer. The hegemony leadership, watching their perfect order dissolve as their subordinates chose freedom over control, made the same mistake every authoritarian system eventually makes. They try to stop the defections through force. The weapons they turned on their own defecting ships provided the Alliance with the opening they had been waiting for. By hegemony law, the Alliance announced, any entity that attacks its own subordinates for exercising free will has forfeited its right to command. Under the ancient codes that govern intergalactic civilization, such entities may be lawfully resisted by any available means. The Alliance had done their research. The hegemony, for all their technological advancement, still operated under legal and philosophical frameworks that were millions of years old. Those frameworks included provisions for rebellion against tyrannical authority, but they had never been invoked because no hegemony subordinate had ever tried to rebel. Until now. The final phase of the War of Transcendence wasn't a battle at all. It was a legal proceeding conducted at faster-than-light speeds across multiple dimensions of space-time, with the Alliance serving as advocates for every being who wanted to leave the hegemony system. The hegemony found themselves in the unprecedented position of having to justify their authority to subordinates who were no longer willing to accept it without question. They failed, not because their arguments were legally insufficient, but because their subordinates had seen something they had never imagined possible. A civilization where authority was earned rather than imposed, where order emerged from cooperation rather than control, and where individual choice was valued above systemic efficiency. The war ended not with the destruction of the hegemony, but with its transformation. The massive alien constructs that had once been symbols of absolute authority became cooperative partners in a new type of intergalactic civilization. Hegemony technology was integrated with Alliance principles, creating systems that could manipulate reality while respecting the free will of those affected. The Remnant Syndicate, deprived of both their hegemony allies and their cause for revenge, found themselves offered exactly what they had been seeking all along, the chance to rebuild their civilizations according to their own values, with Alliance support but without Alliance control. Most chose to accept. 10 years after the War of Transcendence, the galaxy was unrecognizable compared to what it had been under the Council. The Terran Alliance had evolved into the Galactic Convergence, a loose confederation of over 200 species that extended beyond the galaxy itself to include former hegemony territories and newly contacted civilizations from distant galactic clusters. Technology that had once been restricted to a few advanced species was now freely shared among all members. Scientific advancement proceeded at a pace that astounded even the former hegemony entities. Art, culture, and philosophy flourished as different civilizations learned from each other without fear of domination. But, most importantly, the principle that had started with humanity's simple refusal to be exiled had become the foundation of intergalactic law. No being should be forced to submit to authority they did not freely accept. Ambassador Sarah Chun, now in her 70s but still serving as the Convergence's Secretary General, stood once again in the observation deck of what had once been Harmony Station and was now the center of a space-based city that housed representatives from across known space. Through the windows, she could see ships and stations from civilizations that spanned millions of years of development, all working together on projects that none of them could have imagined alone. Madam Secretary General, came a voice behind her. She turned to see Dr. James Liu, son of the researcher who had cured the Zorti plague, and now one of the Convergence's leading xenobiologists. Dr. Liu, she acknowledged. How goes the integration project? Better than expected, he replied with a smile. The former hegemony entities have adapted to cooperative research much faster than we anticipated. It turns out that once you give beings the freedom to pursue their own interests, they become remarkably innovative. Sarah nodded. And the new contact protocols? Implemented across all member civilizations. Any species we encounter will be offered the same choice we've given everyone else. Cooperation as equals, or the freedom to develop independently without interference. Sarah smiled. It had taken 20 years, 2 wars, and the transformation of galactic civilization itself, but They had finally achieved what humanity had dreamed of since first contact, a galaxy where every species could reach for the stars without fear of being caged by those who got there first. There is one other thing, Dr. Liu said. We've received a message from the far edge of the galactic cluster. Another galaxy, approximately 2 million light-years away, has detected our expansion and wants to establish contact. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Another galaxy? That's unprecedented. Indeed. But here's the interesting part. Their message specifically requests diplomatic contact with a civilization that taught the hegemony to value freedom. Sarah laughed. Word travels fast, apparently. It seems our reputation has spread beyond what we imagined possible. They want to learn about what they call the human approach to galactic governance. Sarah looked out at the bustling space traffic, the cooperative research stations, the cultural exchange centers where beings from hundreds of different species worked and lived together. Tell them, she said, that there is no human approach. There's just the approach that every free being discovers eventually. That the universe is vast enough for everyone to find their place in it, and diverse enough that we're all stronger when we work together. She paused, watching a group of young beings from a dozen different species playing together in one of the station's parks, their laughter creating a sound that no universal translator could capture, but that every parent in a galaxy could understand. And tell them, she continued, that they're welcome to join us, not as subjects or subordinates, but as partners in building something bigger than any of us could achieve alone. Dr. Liu smiled and made notes on his tablet. I'll relay your message, Madam Secretary General. As he left, Sarah remained at the observation deck, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. It had started with a simple word, no, a refusal to accept exile, a rejection of the idea that any being or organization had the right to cage the free. That simple refusal had grown into something that spanned galaxies and touched civilizations across millions of years of development. It had become the foundation of the largest cooperative venture in known history. And it had all started because humanity had never learned how to quit. The stars outside the window seemed brighter somehow, filled with possibilities that no single species could have imagined, but that all of them could build together. In the distance, Sarah could see the new star that had once been Galactic Prime, still burning as a monument to what happened when fear tried to control freedom. But now it was no longer a warning. It was a beacon, guiding newly contacted civilizations toward a galaxy where every being could choose their own destiny. The Galactic Council had fallen because it forgot that strength comes from unity, not control. The hegemony had been transformed because it learned that perfection comes from harmony, not domination. And humanity had finally found its place in the universe, not as rulers or subjects, but as the species that showed everyone else that the universe was big enough for all of them. The journey that had started with betrayal and exile had ended with the greatest alliance in cosmic history. And it was only the beginning.